We'll go ahead and get us started. So hi and welcome to our peer learning session on the Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program. My name is Sarah DiVittorio and I'm Director of the National Forest Foundation's Conservation Connect program. We aim to foster and support collaborative forest stewardship efforts, which is why we're here today with you. This is the first session in a series of 12 sessions hosted by the NFF in partnership with the Forest Service's Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program. We're thrilled to be here today with you all kicking off this series. And we'd love to know who you are, where you're joining from. So as I go through my introductory comments, please feel free to say hello and introduce yourself in the chat. Quick word about the NFF. The National Forest Foundation engages Americans in community-based and national programs that promote the health and public enjoyment of the 193 million acre national forest system. In addition to leading forest conservation and responsible recreation efforts, the NFF supports and fosters collaborative forest stewardship efforts that aim to create shared conservation solutions. Few housekeeping items for today. Want you all to know that we are recording today's session. We will be using the chat box for questions when we get to our Q&A session. Want you to know that all registered participants will receive a follow-up email with a link to today's recording, speaker presentations, and other follow-up information. That will include a follow-up survey. So you'll receive a survey actually when you close the Zoom window and then also in the follow-up email. And really would appreciate it if you could take a few minutes to fill that out. That feedback will help us improve this series going forward. Okay, so this series is intended to provide a forum for learning and support for those working on projects as part of the CFLR program, but also for folks working on collaborative stewardship more generally. So many of the issues that are relevant to CFLR projects are also relevant for others. So to help us get a sense of who's on today, we have a poll that just asks how long you've been involved with CFLR, or the last option is not yet involved but learning more. So go ahead and take a minute to respond to that poll, and I will share the results in just a moment. Okay, looks like most folks have answered. So let me share the results. So you should be able to see the results on your screen. It looks like about 44% are in that not yet involved but learning more. And the rest of you are have been involved in the CFLRP in one sense or another, with a pretty big range there. Most folks kind of on the less than 2 to 2 to 6, but some folks who are joining who have a longer duration of history with this program. So welcome everyone, and glad you can all be with us. So during this peer learning session today, our objectives for participants are to learn about the Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program. We'll hear from 3 current projects under that program and engage in group discussion of current successes, challenges, opportunities, and needs. We'll connect with others who are working collaboratively to advance forest stewardship efforts. And we will have an opportunity for you all to provide some ideas to inform future peer learning session topics. In a minute, we're going to turn to our speakers. So just to preview who we have on for you today, we have Bryce Esch and Lindsay Buchanan are going to talk about the Forest Service's Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program. We have from the Rogue Basin CFLR project, Tabitha Rood of the U.S. Forest Service and Belinda Brown and Marco Bay of the Lomacatsi Restoration Project. From the Zuni Mountains Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Project, we have Sean Martin of the Forest Service and Eitan Krasilevsky of the Forest Stewards Guild. And then lastly, from the Longleaf Pine Ecosystem Restoration and Hazardous Fuels Reduction CFLR project, we have Antoine Bonner of the Forest Service, joined by the partner Matt Ross of the National Deer Association. Okay, whoops, I didn't need to go to that slide. So I'm going to stop screen sharing And at this point, I'd like to welcome Lindsay Buchanan and Bryce Esch from the CFLR program to provide some background and updates.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Sarah. And thanks to everyone on the call today for being here, for your interest in CFLRP and this community of practice. It's great both to recognize many of your names and see lots of new ones as well. So I've had really the honor of working in support of this program and approach for the last 10 years with the Forest Service. And first, I want to recognize that while this iteration of our peer learning sessions is kicking off today, NFF has put on these sessions with and for the CFLRP community since 2011. So really want to thank NFF for your continued support and engagement. As Sarah said, we really hope you'll consider this to be a space for you to share certainly what's working well, right? What we can celebrate, and also the challenges and what you're working through. Our hope is that these sessions can be a real resource to you, and I'm really looking forward to hearing about the issues and topics that you all want to dive in together in the months ahead. But first, looking at the poll results, since we do have a number of folks on the call who may be newer to CFLRP, let's just take a few minutes for a brief overview. Next slide, please, Bryce. Great. So CFLRP was created by Congress in law back in 2009, thanks to the work of a coalition of partners. And it was really the first national scale program to invest in collaborative restoration at scale. The program was then reauthorized in the 2018 Farm Bill and provided with additional funding in the bipartisan infrastructure law. So really demonstrating ongoing support there. At its core, perhaps, our authorization outlines the central intents of this program to invest in and encourage collaborative approaches to landscape scale restoration, looking at ecological as well as economic and social outcomes, including reducing wildfire risk and watershed health. The program is intended to utilize wood byproducts and benefit economies, and in doing all of this to leverage multiple funding sources at different scales. Next slide. CFLRP is also, of course, a competitive funding opportunity. So all of our CFLRP landscapes are selected through a rigorous process with proposals evaluated by a committee of external experts and ultimately selected by the Secretary of Agriculture, and then onboarded pending funding availability. The funding that we get for the program can cover up to 50% of the cost of implementation and monitoring on National Forest System lands. So to make our work whole, if you will, we leverage other sources across the landscape, be it other Forest Service investments, partner funds, and in-kind contributions, as well as the value of wood byproducts reinvested in restoration. Next slide. So the last overview piece that I want to highlight is one of the unique, and we've learned really foundational pieces of this program, and that is the requirement for and funding to do multi-party monitoring. We now have our common monitoring strategy, a core set of elements that all our CFLR projects monitor based on lessons learned in the first 10 years of the program, and in addition to monitoring that's important for the local context. And all of this is tracked and shared in project annual reports, monitoring documents, third-party evaluations on our website. So for those joining today who are part of a past or present CFLRP, I really want to just thank you for taking this foundation and turning it into the impactful work that you do on the ground. And thanks to everyone for engaging so we can continue to learn, adapt, and improve in this program together. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague Bryce to share some examples of the kinds of impacts we've seen and where we are with the program today.
Great, thank you, Lindsay. So as Lindsay mentioned, this program's been around for over 10 years now. What have we learned about the outcomes of the program? We know that it produces outsized results on the landscape. So between 2013 and 2019, CFLRP accounted for 9% of the restoration-related spending and 11% of the National Forest Service treatable acreage. But it produced 19% of the hazardous fuels treatments, 15% of the timber volume sold, and 26% of vegetation acres improved. So, you know, without getting into the exact numbers, you can just see that the impact, right, is greater than the investment, which is really great to see. The program also generates economic and community benefits in the form of jobs and local labor income, and attracts significant partner investments. So as Lindsay mentioned, there's match. And what we've seen for the program is that for every dollar invested, $1.80 is attracted. We also know that partners and the Forest Service staff involved are really happy with the program. From a survey that the National Forest Foundation did of Forest Service participants and partners, 81% agreed that more restoration was happening due to collaboration, and an overwhelming majority of folks believed that, you know, relationship building and collaborative work was a really important benefit of the program, and that these projects were improving ecosystem resilience. And then similarly, a survey done by the University of Idaho looking at collaboration in Idaho showed that collaboration results in more acres treated, that there were increases in efficiency, and that collaborative projects were more complex and met a greater diversity of objectives compared to non-collaborative projects. So where are we at now as a program? So as of right now, this year, we have 17 active CFLRP projects. These are projects that are actively receiving CFLRP dollars, and that includes 10 CFLRP extensions, so projects that were originally funded in 2010 or 2012 that are still receiving CFLRP dollars. We have 7 projects that were approved and have not yet been funded. These are projects that went through the proposal process, were recommended by the FACA committee that oversees that proposal process, and then were approved by the secretary, but we've not yet had the appropriation in our annual budget to be able to fund those. And then we have 15 monitoring only projects, or projects we sometimes call alumni or sunset projects. These are projects that were originally funded in 2010 or 2012. They had their full 10 years of funding, and now they're not receiving any more CFLRP dollars, but they're still doing a lot of work on the ground, and they're also completing that 15-year monitoring requirement. And then just as a note, we did have the CFLRP FACA committee convene earlier this year to review new proposals, and they recommended 2 projects to the Secretary of Agriculture, and we're waiting on a decision from the Secretary, and we'll update you all when we know more about that. So just a quick map to show you what I just explained, which is that we have these 17 active projects receiving CFLRP funding. Those are the projects in teal. And then we have projects that are fulfilling their 15 years of monitoring requirement in our sunset projects, and those are in that tan color. 2 things about the program are that we're waiting reauthorization. As Lindsay mentioned, the program was reauthorized in 2018 for 5 years. So now we're waiting for reauthorization in the 2023 Farm Bill. And we're also waiting for a FY24 budget. And I think no one will be surprised that both of those things are a little bit delayed, so to speak, and we're expecting to see extensions. We're hoping for extensions for the Farm Bill authorization and for the budget in the form of a continuing resolution or a CR. We just want to reiterate that we don't expect any problems with the program moving forward. CFLRP has broad bipartisan support, and we're hoping to see these things come through here in the next month or so. So your CFLRP community of practice is made up of Lindsay and myself. We are the Washington office team of program lead and program coordinator, and we also have regional coordinators, a CFLRP coordinator at each region. We have monthly coordinator calls. These are for each project Forest Service coordinator and the regional coordinators. They're an internal call. And then we have monthly CFLRP monitoring calls. And then we also are having these peer learning sessions, which include all hands web meetings. And both the monitoring community of practice calls and these web meetings are open to everyone, including partners. We have a few resources and references. These might come in handy. We'll share out the slides after this session, and you'll have our email addresses. We also have a great deal of information on our public-facing website. The link is there in the middle of the slide. And then there's a lot of monitoring resources on our shared box site. And this is associated with that monitoring community of practice. And so this box is available to Forest Service staff, but also to partners who are external to the agency. And then, of course, our internal staff can access the CFLRP SharePoint, which are a number of resources there related to reporting and budgeting and things like that. So I'll stop there and turn it back over to Sarah.
Wonderful. Thanks, Bryce. Okay. Well, we're going to go right into our next speakers, and we're going to hear from 3 CFLR projects. We're really grateful to these 3 groups for their willingness to be first in this series to share out about their efforts. Future webinars will feature more of these kinds of share outs, so keep that in mind. Would love to hear from your group somewhere down the line as well. We've asked folks to prepare about 10 minutes of remarks. We'll hold Q&A until after all 3 presentations. During Q&A, you can also ask questions of Bryce and Lindsay. And as I mentioned at the top of the call, we will be doing that Q&A through the chat. So you can go ahead and start submitting your questions in the chat, and we'll keep track of those. And then after our last speakers, we'll go ahead and answer as many of those questions as we can. So our first featured project is the Rogue Basin CFLRP, and I'd like to welcome Tabitha Rood of the U.S. Forest Service, Belinda Brown of Lomacatsi Restoration Project, and Marco Bay of Lomacatsi Restoration Project.
Thank you, Sarah.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Go
Thank
ahead, Marco.
you. Sarah, is we're going to share, correct, our presentation? Okay.
Yeah, Marco, I think you've got the master, and I'll be clicking through, but thank you for the opportunity for us to present. I just wanted to throw in there, for those that don't know, Southern Oregon is very much on fire right now, and it's a red flag day. So when we accepted this invitation to present, I think it was prior to July 15th when the flat fire broke out, and we've since had one breakout on the Powers Ranger District just north in the Grassy Knob Wilderness. So I apologize, but I accepted a lead read job, and I'm on my last day of that. So I'm trying to make time for this, and really excited to share with you guys the Rogue Basin CFLRP, and have to give a nod to our partners, other partners besides Lomacatsi, who's on this presentation as well. This is a group effort and just didn't have the time to coordinate with the fire season this summer. So thank you, Belinda and Marco, for being here with us and presenting the Rogue Basin CFLRP. So the map that's shown is our total project area. Our project was selected in 2022 for funding under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law as additional CFLRP appropriations. And the proposed restoration project includes a 20-year strategic plan that we'll get into a little bit later, the Rogue Basin strategy that was really the foundation for the CFLRP proposal. The proposed restoration project is 4.6 million acres that are included in that purple polygon that you see on the map, with a really big focus on the red polygons in the center with our highest wildfire risk. So, Marco, if you want to, well, stay on this slide for just a second, but you can see from our map, we have a real smorgasbord of land management agencies. We've got BLM, private, Forest Service, tribal land, national park. All of these different entities are involved in our CFLRP proposal, and we are leaning on each other to get implementation and be efficient in planning. So you can go ahead to the next slide. Our main objectives for restoration in this area focus on wildfire risk reduction, watershed health and water quality, old growth habitat and unique habitats like meadow and savanna habitat, as well as the socioeconomic aspect of the CFLRP programs, increasing local jobs and economic impact from restoration activities. This slide shows the all lands 1.1 million acres. Marco, I didn't know if you wanted to chat on this slide in particular.
Yeah, I could just add, thank you, Tabitha. So the Rogue Basin Strategy developed through the leadership of the Southern Oregon Forest Restoration Collaborative, one of our lead NGO partners. I believe Terry Fairbanks is on the webinar, executive director. It analyzed about 4.6 million acres of the Rogue Basin, analyzing about 1.1 million acres severely departed in need of restorative treatments. And it strategically analyzed that from where best to put those treatments with community buy-in and support, and where the highest risk to WUI communities, late successional reserves, and T&E species, old growth habitat, and ecosystem services. So it's kind of a blueprint for us to plan some of our work and our projects going forward.
Yeah, thank you, Marco. So this map shows kind of the wildfire risk, quantitative wildfire risk assessment for the Pacific Northwest. And as you can see, the Rogue Basin called out in that lower left corner has a lot of red and a lot of deep red. So we have more trees than people by far in this region, and very well separated by the Siskiyou Mountains in between the whole basin that we're covering. So some of the communities, we have some of the richest biodiversity in the continental US, as well as a very complex socioeconomic environment in which we operate. So folks on the east side versus the west side, even on the northwest side versus the southwest side, it's highly different, and making everyone happy is challenging. But I think this group has been successful at engaging with all of these groups. And again, that's due to a lot of the 20-year work that went behind the Rogue Basin Strategy. So here's just an example. When we were funded, the original proposal was for $39 million over the 10-year period, and we were funded for $30,000. So we had to adjust our targets. You can see most of our treatment metrics are hazardous fuels reduction via various methods, being mechanical or prescribed fire. We have WUI acreage, road maintenance, and we actually included trails in our work plan update as an area needed for wildfire access and egress. Riparian area improvements, as I mentioned, are also super important and one of the highlights of this area of our wild rivers. You can go to the next one. And the rationale for engaging in this presentation, we wanted to call out kind of the most unique functions of our collaborative and our CFLRP to date. We are taking that message from leadership and from Lomakatsi's leadership over the last 20 years to really engage with our tribes and develop a workforce that is equitable and engaged in forest restoration. So I'm going to pass it over to Belinda and Marco here to really dive into the Intertribal Ecosystem Restoration Partnership and a lot of the activities we are doing as a group to engage our workforce and communicate and outreach to communities that are very diverse.
Thank you, Tabitha. I'll start off and I'll pass it over to Belinda. So Lomakatsi Restoration Project, we're one non-government organization involved in the CFLRP. Our mission is to restore ecosystems and sustainability of communities, cultures, and economies. A very long-term partner of the Forest Service through multiple agreements, stewardship, and other agreements across regions 5 and 6. We formed the Rogue Forest Partners, which is comprised of 4 non-government organizations, federal and state agencies, and then other partners meaningfully engaged are our tribal community partners, municipal fire districts, watershed councils, to accomplish this body of work through stewardship authority. So back to the Rogue Basin Strategy, we do have a plan on how to move forward. The whys were expressed and the how. So when we think about increasing the pace and scale of forest restoration, we hear that tagline expressed a lot. We have to build that capacity. We've been building that capacity for decades. Now we're having to scale that capacity. So as our workflow is planned and our treatments are designed from NEPA to projects that are ready for implementation, we're thinking about that accessibility, land allocation, and the workflow, and how do we get there across this geography on this slide you're seeing now. So the crosshatched areas are some of our priority projects. A lot of this is funded through state dollars, through the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board Focus Investment Partnership, and that leverages the federal dollars through CFLR and other federal awards and federal allocations. We also have projects going on that are adjacent to Forest Service on BLM. We have oak restoration initiatives with a lot of meaningful tribal engagement, all lands projects, so kind of all weaving together across that 4.6 million acres and to prioritize those treatments. So one pillar of that implementation strategy is accomplished through a stewardship agreement with 3 nonprofit partners you see here in the Forest Service, all bringing different expertise to the project. And then under that implementation are a suite of contractors, timber operators, other nonprofits, where subawards are exchanged and different activities are implemented. So we're utilizing that stewardship agreement to, over the years we have been, to incrementally build that capacity, and now continuing to do that through this CFLR work. So, focused on the socioeconomic benefit part, we have a strong monitoring team, a multi-party monitoring team. Our specialists, both on the Forest Service and on the private side, we wanted to focus on more on how we do business and tribal engagement as part of this presentation. There's a lot we can cover. So with stewardship management, the partners are laying out the units, we're writing the prescriptions, the Forest Service is certifying those prescriptions, we're assisting in the marketing and measurement, and then we're implementing those treatments on the ground and we're monitoring those treatments. Where we want to scale to is more of an A to Z effort in the future, like we're doing on adjacent forests. And in order to get there, this is a very complicated landscape to work in. You can see that photo. It's like surgical implementation, really steep slopes, highly departed forest system. Needs a lot of love and care to get fire back in this system and set the stage. So we're also thinking about equitable jobs, social equity, workforce development, good paying jobs, health benefits, retirement. We're able to do that through our Promotora program within our organization, Lomacatsi, and bring that to the CFLR initiative. And then another pillar of that work is our Tribal Ecosystem Restoration Partnership Program that's been in operation for 15 years. And that's what's so amazing about these CFLR projects is nonprofits and other partners can layer in their programs for a mutual benefit of the objectives of the landscape treatments. So this particular program is one of the pillars of our organization, operated by tribal leadership, tribal staff, and ITERP, which Belinda will talk about in a second. So it's really designed under 5 interrelated initiatives. We want to have those strategic partnerships, develop long-term agreements, assemble and train the tribal workforce, and build that administrative, programmatic, and technical capacity. And then we've been incubating tribal contracting businesses through this effort as well to assist in the implementation and utilization and service forestry capacity. So I will pause and turn it over to you, Belinda, for ITERP.
Hello, everyone. My name is Belinda Brown, and I'm a member of the Koselleq Band of the Ajumawi Otsege Nation, otherwise known as the Pit River Tribe. We're located in northeastern California and cover 4 counties and 3 forests. So I've been involved with CFLRP almost since its inception as the executive director of the Blue Mountain Forest Partners back in 2011. And that's really driven the interest of why we should collaborate. And at that time, there was a lot of polarization. So we've come a long way since the Public Law 11111, 2009 Omnibus Public Land Management Act of 2009. And I'm really excited to see where we're going. The tribes and the areas that you're looking at represents 10 tribes. And we're hailing today, Marco and I, from what they call Kohosade, the Shasta Nation. So 9 federally recognized tribes, 3 non-federally recognized tribes, and the goal of ITERP is to restore the aquatic and terrestrial habitats that that are near and dear to our heart. Next. So steering committee's partners, as you're seeing now, the theme is teamwork makes the dream work, going from folks maybe not talking to each other to working together as a well-oiled machine. And that's what we see with the best practices of the Rogue Basin strategy, leadership with our ITEC, the indigenous traditional ecological knowledge, tribes being included as land-based, place-based people at the first inception or idea of a project. So we're doing that through meetings and through information that we share with the tribes that help get them out the field trips and on the ground and be able to work together and advise us on these projects that we're implementing across large landscapes. Next. So again, the pillars and the standardized protocols that we include tribes with and the outreach and engagement has to do with when are we going to apply for funding? What funding are we going to apply for? What treatments are we going to implement? And how are we going to look at those treatments through the lens of the place-based tribal people that we're working with? So they take the lead in these project areas a lot and advise us on how we restore oaks, how we restore sagebrush habitat, how we restore the mixed conifer forests, and how we add that value of workforce implementation on all of these lands with a tribal workforce, with youth, and being able to utilize our state funding with OCC dollars and weave it all together to be able to bring together these to fruition, these large landscape implementation projects, and then be able to monitor for long term. So there's many elements that we work with in tribal communities: the traditional leadership, the tribal membership, incubating tribal businesses, tribal economic development. We work close with the TARO departments, the tribal employment rights offices of tribes, the TIPO departments, the tribal historic preservation officers, cultural heritage departments. Currently, we're doing NEPA on 2 projects, the A to Z on 2 projects in the Modoc National Forest, and we're really happy about that because we are finally getting to co-management and shared stewardship of our ancestral lands. Marco?
So to bolster that capacity, we were fortunate working with Tabitha and the leadership of our forest supervisor, Merv George, to develop some funding that is through a challenge cost share agreement, a master agreement that will go to tribal workforce capacity development on the CFLR. And additionally, neighboring tribes outside of the geography that might be closer to the landscape than the tribes to the north are participating in that effort of workforce development. We're leveraging state dollars, significant in millions of dollars of investment of state funds. And over time, Public Law 93-638, tribal investments as well, to get this workforce capacity initiative launched. These are just some photos of our recruits that have graduated after a year-long program, and actually today are on the ground on these projects, implementing in the Upper Applegate watershed, one of our areas. So training that workforce in partnership with city municipalities, federal agencies, tribes, building that capacity. And then you could see some of the results of that before and after, really setting the stage for the return of prescribed fire and, from a tribal lens, cultural fire, eco-cultural restoration. And then trying to develop that indigenous fire knowledge, working toward that through various programs and trainings, certification programs in partnership layered into this. It's really becoming a learning institute. The Rogue Basin Prescribed Fire Training Exchange, hosted by the Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest, was a great avenue for this program to be layered into treatments on the ground as part of the Ashland Forest Resiliency Project. So we have the Rogue Basin Treks and then Lomakatsi's Tribal Ecological Forestry Program married together, deploying tribal crews, and that through a challenge cost share agreement and the forward thinking of Tabitha and others to put those investments in specified for tribal engagement and tribal workforce capacity development. And that doesn't only include forest labor. You can see a crew there of tribal members doing goshawk surveys, doing culture and heritage surveys today. We have a crew on the ground on an adjacent forest, but I think the hope of the future, and I know Tabitha has a desire for this as well, is that these A to Z projects will build tribal capacity to do the surveys, assist with specialist reports, get some of the NEPA work done, that's tribally centered. And I'll turn it back to you, Belinda. We're getting close.
And this is our Undersecretary of Ag here Undersecretary Homer Wilkes here, Dr. Homer Wilkes, that came out from the USDA. And he was on the ground with our youth. And I will say one thing about this. My background is health and human services. These programs are saving lives in our Native American communities and in Indian country. And this is the heart of our community, to really build up a labor pool that can take over and run our departments in our tribal communities, and also be able to help from the political level, policy level, to help get more funding on the ground, leverage, work smarter, not harder, leverage the funding together, but also come together in healing. This is an Earth Lodge on the Edison Chiloquin property, and it is 580 acres. If you get a chance, please look it up. It's called the Chiloquin Act. It was 1980. And we are constructing an Earth Lodge the first time in 150 years. So it's bringing tribes together, Pit River Tribe, Fort Bidwell, Northern Paiute Tribe, the Klamath tribes, all in a workforce capacity. And the message from this Earth Lodge ceremony is that connection is going to overcome addictions. And so, as many of us well know, the history with Native American tribes has not been that great of a history. Our tribes do, I say, win the I Told You So award because we were the first and continue to be the first best stewards of our land. And that is really important as we include and reach out for tribal engagement in all of these projects. It's bringing us back to those ceremonies and those rituals. Fire is bringing us together again. I happen to be around long enough to know when the Public Law 11111 was created. It's because we were polarized. It's because we needed to come together and talk. Politicians need to talk to scientists. Native tribes need to talk to government officials. We all need to come together because, as our elders tell us, we need to work together for the climate crisis that we're in right now. So it is all hands on decks, and the Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program has helped us get there as we work together with our communities and as we come up with solutions that are far reaching to help us treat these landscapes.
Thank you guys so much. I know we took maybe a little bit more time, but these are big projects with a lot to discuss. And Belinda and Marco, thank you for joining me and sharing this.
Thank you, Tabitha.
Thank you all so much. What a wonderful story and presentation from the Rogue Basin. Really loved all the photos. They brought it alive. We are running just a little bit behind, but that's okay. We'll move right into our next presentation from the Zuni Mountains CFLRP. And for that, I'd like to invite Sean Martin of the Forest Service and Eitan Krasilevsky of the Forest Stewards Guild to come on screen.
Hey, is our presentation showing?
It's up. Yep. Thanks, Eitan.
Okay, great. Well, Sean, I'll just keep talking. Hi, everyone. Eitan Krasilevsky with the Forest Stewards Guild. Thanks for having us. Really impressive roster here with the other presenters to be on, and we're going to tell our story about being 10 years in on a CFLR project. And it's going to be about the Zuni Mountains CFLR, which the Zuni Mountains Collaborative is our collaborative group connected to this. And I'll pass it off to Sean.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name's Sean Martin. I'm the forest silviculturist on the Cibola National Forest and also the CFLRP coordinator for about the last 7 to 8 years. So anyway, I think we'll just dive right into it. Let's go ahead.
Sean, I think this, well, actually, maybe this one's me. I'll just go ahead. So there was a lot of buildup to getting the CFLR funding and to be part of the program. And so, you know, people were working on kind of building back the workforce, getting connected to the landscape, doing restorative thinning and prescribed burn treatments. And you can see it kind of took about a decade to get to the point where we were successful with our 2012 application for proposal. There are some important moments here, like early collaborative forest restoration program. It's missing the L. It's a New Mexico program that was established in 2000, and a lot of smaller grants like CFRPs helped create the stage for the CFLR being a successful proposal. There was a lot of kind of wood capacity development that also started in 2005. And then another important thing that you'll hear about from Sean is the stewardship agreement with the National Wild Turkey Federation. And on the right, you can see we have a much smaller landscape than the Rogue Basin that we just learned about. It's about 220,000 acres. And we're in west central New Mexico. And it's a ponderosa pine dominated landscape surrounded by more desert ecosystems. Sean, anything you want to add to that?
No, not really. I think we can go to the next slide. Thanks, Eitan. Okay, so looking at the map there, it's pretty busy, but I think that's just indicative of the amount of work that we've been able to accomplish. And as you move up to the northwest, a lot of that is getting done now, and a lot of that is actually planned for. So as Eitan said, it took about 10 years to work our way up to becoming a CFLR project. And in that time, over the last 20 years or so, we've actually managed to treat about 25,000 acres. Forest restoration, we've done some meadow restoration, and we've done a lot of fuel breaks to protect communities there around Blue Water Lake. Now, within the National Wild Turkey Federation agreement, that was something that came on a little bit later. And I'll go into some of the reasons for that. But under that agreement, we've been able to do some uneven aged forest management in there, trying to promote the establishment of a new age class because of a history of railroad logging that occurred and left us with a monoculture of even aged ponderosa pine out there. And then coming along afterward, it took a few years to kind of get the prescribed burning, in flow behind all the thinning. And as of this point, we've completed about 5,000 acres in there, and we've started using aerial ignitions, which has really increased production, and we're currently treating somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 to 2,000 acres a year. We've had some hiccups in terms of shutdowns for different reasons, and I'll talk a little bit about that later as we go on. One great thing about the National Wild Turkey Federation agreement is that it allows you to pay forward acres. So in a sense, it's banking acres, and currently right now we actually have about 6,500 acres that are paid for and in the agreement, just ready to go, waiting to be treated. And out of that, we've actually got about 3,500 of that is shovel ready. We can start right now, and we are currently trying to ramp up. We've got a goal of about 2,000 acres a year, and we hope to achieve that maybe this year and certainly by next year. Another big accomplishment, and it's been huge for us, is developing a participating agreement with the Forest Stewards Guild. And, this helps feed into the work that keeps the collaborative going. They run the website, they facilitate meetings. It's just a really wonderful agreement. And another big accomplishment was in 2020, the area to the northwest is actually the Puerco EA. And that is about 81,000 acres, and it includes about 30,000 acres of ponderosa pine thinning. Also includes a lot of pinyon juniper woodland restoration work that would supply fuel wood and reduce fire hazard. Another big thing that happened about that same time is we entered into a shared stewardship agreement between the Forest Service and New Mexico. And we are one of 10 across the state. And so that just helps us leverage state funds and other funds. And that was a big milestone for us. And then, of course, one of the last things I'd like to point to is that we got the extension in 2021, and we had spent the first 10 years down in the southeast part in the Blue Water section of the project, and so this allows us to continue our work for the next 10 years as we move to the northwest. Okay, next slide. All right, so talking about this National Wild Turkey Federation Stewardship Agreement, this has really been huge for us because for the first couple years, we were trying to do traditional timber sales, and due to the relative isolation of the project and the lack of mills around, we just couldn't get anybody to bid on timber sales. So part of the getting into the CFLRP program actually enabled the local mill to feel comfortable having that long-term wood supply. And so basically, the agreement really helped because it's actually between the Turkey Federation and between the mill, and more recently it's kind of switched over. Now it's between the operator, and they do the work and sell the wood to the mill now. But like I said, I mean, it's really it's been critical to bank funds for the future. It provides a lot more flexibility. And it doesn't just cover thinning and forest restoration work. We've actually done quite a bit of road work through this agreement, and some non-commercial treatments too, so to provide fuel wood. And then there's options for other types of work that we're still exploring and haven't done, but we're starting to expand and do different things under this agreement. So it's been incredibly helpful. Okay, and then I think Eitan might have the next one.
Yeah, so we heard about multi-party monitoring. That's a really important part in this landscape and in all CFLRs. And so there's been a lot of efforts over the years, because we're about 11 or 12 years in to this work. And so we've done a variety of different plots to really try to capture the change we're hoping to see on the landscape. And I'll show some snapshots in a future slide. Where there's not a ton of water out here. And so where there is water, we're really monitoring quality and some quantity measurements because we have endangered fish that are relying on the scarce water we do have. And so that's a big part of the project is, and this photo down here really shows kind of like the dry ponderosa forests right above the critical habitat for the endangered fish down in the drainage. So the connectivity is really important. And we're trying to, avoid any habitat loss by managing the whole system. Shushkin Fen is an important headwaters of the chub and sucker. So that's another big focus is protecting and restoring that fen to its full functionality. There's another thing I'll touch on is fire effects monitoring. So burning together, having local fire departments and NGOs like the Forest Stewards Guild burn with the Forest Service, and then having them help us when we might be burning on non-federal land is really important. And because fire has such a big effect on our treatments, it's important to monitor the effects of fire. And so there's fire effects reports for some of the burns, and we're trying to keep that going. And we also have a prescribed fire agreement with the CBLA to try to build a program there. And then the next slide, I'll touch on collaboration. The collaboration really started in 2005. And then it was more formalized in 2011-12 with a proposal, but we still have a generally informal approach to collaboration, which means sometimes people, pop in and out of the collaboration, but we do have a good steady core, as you can see in some of the pictures here. And in New Mexico, fuel wood for home heating is really important, and that was really exposed during the pandemic. And so that's a huge part of what we do. Is also the project provides fuel wood to communities, and that is the last couple of years it's been growing with partnerships with the Wood for Life program and we actually have a wood utilization staff person out on the landscape, really trying to build those connections. We have a lot of connectivity with our communities, pueblos, and tribes. And we have various workforce initiatives, such as Youth Corps, marking crews, and also seasonal fire crews, as well as kind of an outreach effort you can see with some a PBS crew here in the bottom corner picture, where we're, kind of connect the landscape to a broader audience. And Sean, you have the next slide.
Yep. Okay, so like any landscape level project, we have not been without our challenges. First and foremost, I'll go through these pretty quickly, but weather here in New Mexico and the Zuni Mountains in particular, the high point is 9,000 feet, which for around here is really not that high. And so we don't get really, really cold winters. And we also, are tending to get fire restrictions almost every year now, although this year we did get a reprieve. Back at the end of 2019, we had a Mexican spotted owl injunction, and that essentially shut us down the entire 2020 season. But that also, it provided an opportunity for New Mexico State Forestry. They were really able to step up and come to agreements and contracts with a lot of the several of the local private landowners, because the Zuni Mountain landscape is, I wouldn't call it checkerboarded, but there are a lot of private inholdings in there. And so through the efforts of the New Mexico State Forestry, they were able to do work on the private lands and feed the mill to keep the mill going, because without wood coming off the national forest, I think the mill would have shut down that year. So turnover in logging contractors, I think we're on our third in the last 10 years, but things are going well. Poor road conditions. We have the Forest Road 50 that runs the length of the Zuni Mountains. And it's one of those roads that sometimes Google Maps will route people through, and at the wrong time of the year. And so we've been able to, as projects work through that corridor, do some work to improve that road. And then mill capacity, we basically, our project is feeding only one mill, and it's basically the only one within the working circle of West Central New Mexico. They are able to handle all the wood that comes out of there, and they do this through a very diversified effort. I think roughly about 50% is dimensional lumber. They make heating pellets. They make wood chips. They make playground chips. Lots of diversified different products. Let's see, development of non-veg management projects. So we've really been stuck the first 10 or so years in a strict forest restoration type mode. And we're really, really looking to expand our opportunities with the Puerco EA decision in 2020. We really expanded our restoration efforts to go much farther beyond just forest restoration. So we've got a lot of watershed treatments. We've got some wildlife treatments, and actually some range improvements made it into that too. It was really kind of a smorgasbord of an EA. And just to give you an idea, our publics are very supportive. An 81,000 acre landscape, we did it with an EA with just a proposed action and no action. And we had, I think, 8 comments, and mostly all were supportive of the project. So we're extremely thankful for that. Recently, we've had some private land issues and access. One of the major landowners sold his land, and that temporarily cut off our access into some planned units for this winter. So we've been scrambling to find workarounds for that, and I think we've done that. I think probably like everywhere else in the Forest Service, our heritage shop, we've had a bottleneck there. We're still staying ahead of it, but boy, it's been a challenge for them. And not having a dedicated CFLRP coordinator, that's what I am. It's a collateral duty, and it spreads a person really thin, and it can be very challenging. And then the logging production rate, I mentioned, we've been really trying to ramp it up, because we're getting to the end of this latest 10-year stewardship agreement. And at the production rate we're at now, we're either going to leave money on the table or redo an agreement or something. But That has been a challenge to keep that production rate up, especially over the last couple of years, but we are increasing in that arena. Next one, please. All right, so in an effort to conclude on a more positive note, I'd like to cover some of our successes and opportunities. So Eitan mentioned the Shushkin Fen restoration. It's a wet meadow. It had been there used to be a fence. The fence got torn down. You know, it's been degraded. It's kind of drying out. We recently completed a fence around that, and also some fencing to protect some in-stream willows and some spring restoration. I mentioned the range and road improvements that we're looking forward to doing. Of course, the Forest Stewards youth crew, they come on for I think about 2 months, and they work through the different program areas, and they get a really broad natural resource introduction into the different programs and who does what and how it all interconnects. And we're working on some aspen protection fencing. Aspen is pretty much located in drainages. It's kind of riparian aspen system, and a lot of it is really degraded and it's heavily browsed. So we're looking at doing probably about 200 acres of fencing in the future, and trying to develop our own volunteer workforce that can help build and maintain fences. We have a prescribed fire agreement, as Eitan mentioned, and that's working with folks across the fences, as well as volunteer fire departments and other partners to work together to put fire back on the landscape, not just on federal lands, but all lands. There's been some outreach. PBS had a series on EcoSense, which is talking a lot about reintroducing fire back into the landscape in the Southwest, including the Zuni Mountains. Another thing, we had the western part of the Puerco project. We were able to work with New Mexico State Forestry to help fund the heritage surveys and clearances out there. So that really kind of helped with the bottleneck, and having them step up to help us out in that arena was really huge. And then, like I said, we're hoping to increase our production. It's building, and right now, the log deck at the mill going into the winter is the best it's been in years. So we're pretty happy about that, and we're looking forward to our future. And I think that's it.
Yeah, I'll just add that the youth program has been going from before the CFLR, and it hires from local communities and tribes. You have a picture of the timber marking crew in action, which is kind of an additive resource, and then some snapshots of some of the communications and monitoring communications we're trying to do to connect people in the collaborative and in the broader communities so that we can close the feedback loop and get people involved in management decisions.
Thanks, everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you, Eitan and Sean. Really appreciate that presentation. And I'm sure a lot of those challenges resonate with others who are on the call, as well as some of the opportunities. So let's move into our last presentation. I'd like to welcome Antoine Bonner and Matt Ross to come on screen. And I think Antoine primarily is going to be sharing his screen and presenting. And they are with the Longleaf Pine Ecosystem Restoration and Hazardous Fuels Reduction, CFLR.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being a part of this. It was my pleasure to put together this presentation and just highlight everything we've done in the last 10 years and our path moving forward. Thank you again, Mr. Matt Ross of NDA, for participating today. That being said, let's begin. So this is the Solar Range Edition, and we are the Longleaf Pine Ecosystem Hazardous Fuel Reduction CFLRP in Region 8. I stated we got CFLRP back in 2012, and we recently applied for the extension and got allocations in 2023. But a little bit about us: we encompass over 378,000 acres, and historically we were in a uplands-dominated longleaf pine forest, and we were diverse in herbaceous ground cover that supported a wide variety of wildlife. That included the Gulf tortoise, the red cockaded woodpecker, as well as the back pine snake. And due to early settlers, most of the old growth on leaf and other mature trees were harvested between 1880 and 1930. And private lands that would later become the DeSoto Range District was purchased by the federal government in the 1930s, after which the Civilian Conservation Force and Forest Service began to reestablish pine trees across the National Forest lands in South Mississippi. But while that was a worthwhile endeavor, there were some hiccups. Longleaf pine was not always planted back in these areas once it once grew. And that was largely in part by how little we understood about longleaf pine management. And several decades later, we would come to have a better understanding that would take hold in the 1970s. Faster growing pines such as slash and loblolly were planted in many historic sites where longleaf once grew. Of course, those faster growing pines also supplied the timber industry. So faster growing, shorter rotation, that was favored a lot throughout South Mississippi. As I stated earlier, we received CFLR funding in 2012, applied for the extension, and received the fundings this year. But in that 10-year time frame, we were able to sell and harvest around 110,000 CCF in timber volume. CCF is cubic feet. That's how we measure the volume that we cut and sell here in DeSoto. We treated over 260,000 acres of hazardous fuel reduction, as well as created over 950 jobs to the local communities and local counties. All right, we'll move right along here. Currently, there's just a couple of sales that we have going on our forest. As you can see here, this is classified as a first thinning, as well as a clear cut on the right. Basically, we go in and just reduce the basal area, as well as removing off-site pines, the said slash and loblolly earlier, and replanting that to longleaf pine. And this is a heavily dependent ecosystem that depends on fire. Longleaf needs fire. There comes with serotinins, they need that to open, and as well as covering, killing off the any other desirable species of trees that we have in the forest. And as I'm gonna say again, we've treated over 260,000 acres of hazardous fuel. This not only includes prescribed burning, but also thinning of timber stands. So it's all encompassing. And I'm moving pretty quickly here, but I want to highlight our partnerships. And there's quite a few more that I wasn't able to put on this slide, namely the Climb CDC, the Gulfport crew that's located in Gulfport, Mississippi. We have multiple power companies that also helps us. Land Trust for Mississippi Coastal Plain, the Longleaf Implementation Team, as well as the Mississippi Forestry Commission, Camp Shelby, and the National Deer Association. And with that being said, I would like Mr. Ross to briefly speak on behalf of NDA. Mr. Ross.
Thanks, Antoine. And how's everybody doing? So my name is Matt Ross. I'm the Director of Conservation for the National Deer Association. Pleased to be here to talk a little bit about our experience with CFLRP. We're much newer to the program and stewardship compared to the other two presentations on the Rogue Basin and Zuni Mountains, which were excellent presentations to see the depth of experience and the obstacles and challenges faced, as well as the opportunities and successes. The National Deer Association has been involved with the CFLRP project there on DeSoto National Forest for just a couple of years. We hold a master stewardship agreement and signed that in 2020, so just 3 years ago, for regions 8 and 9. That's a 20-year agreement, and entered into a stewardship agreement, a supplemental project agreement on DeSoto shortly after that. The first project that we took on that was to help fund partly through the CFLRP was Biloxi Flats restoration project, and our portion of that from the NDA is about 1,200 acres of restorative activities. It varies, but they all fulfill the needs and goals of CFLRP. There's about 6 different items listed on that. They include maintain, protect, restore, and enhance native forest ecosystems, and namely longleaf, as Antoine just talked about. Restore historic fire conditions, promote the recovery of proposed T&E and sensitive species, decrease susceptibility of southern pine beetle and other insects and disease, improve overall forest health, and provide adaptability to changing conditions. And a couple of the photos that he showed there were enlisted to do several of those activities. In fact, have one operation ongoing right now that's been paused. I'll talk a little bit about challenges that we faced as a partner, but we basically taken on that 1,200 acres of stewardship work through a goods for services agreement. And it includes clear cuts with reserves, removing mostly loblolly and slash, first thin and second thin, and then a list of stewardship activities, which one of the great benefits of the Stewardship Authority is it allows you to accomplish work beyond forest restoration or forest regeneration. So we have other things like bog restoration included on our list of stewardship activities that we're supposed to be doing, soil and water stabilization, and even some herbicide work. Challenges that we face just kind of generally as the partner or one of the partners, he's mentioning many here. Again, right now of the 1,200 acres that we're responsible for, we have accomplished one timber sale that we're working through. And one of the main challenges from that is weather, as one of the other presenters talked about. In New Mexico, weather down on the Gulf Coast is certainly a complication as well. These are really hydric soils we're working on. It's obviously weather dependent with those types of rain events that you might get with hurricane season. And so those hydric pine ecosystems that not only depend on fire, but they tend to be seasonally wet. We began in operation and ended up just getting a lot of rain right after starting in 2020 and have had to pause that. But it's about as dry as it's been from the district ranger down through the entire staff on DeSoto has been explaining to us. And we're monitoring those conditions now and have a crew moving back in actually next week to pick up where they left off on all of those, the good sides of the goods for services. So weather has been one of the challenges we've experienced. Bringing in outside contractors is one of the things as a partner that we have experience, which I'm sure is not, most forests are not immune to that, but have been able to circumvent that by working with private industry. One of the strengths of working with a partner, as the other presenters have talked about, is being able to come up with unconventional or innovative ways to approach contractors and bring in new blood to bid on certain jobs. And we've been able to see that and get bid premiums on that there on DeSoto. And then the last thing is finding a source, mill sources. And one of the parts of our agreement with DeSoto National Forest is having to develop new weight scale agreements with mills. And we were able to use our contacts to be able to create a solution for that and have new resources for that wood to go to. I'll kind of close with, from our perspective on the successes and opportunities, I applaud Antoine and his cohort of employees there at DeSoto National Forest. In the past 3 years, they have been nothing short of more than willing to work with us on the partnership, being able to approach new and different adaptive strategies when we ran into some of those challenges. And the level of communication that's been coming across from that forest has been incredibly good. One example that I'll give you on some of those opportunities and successes that I figured I'd mention was just investigating alternative methods to accomplish the same goals of desired future conditions. For example, the lop and scatter stewardship activity listed within our stewardship agreement is in bogs. That's the bog restoration part of it. And being able to utilize and talk through how we might be able to use that product as opposed to leaving it on the ground. Not all of it, but some of it was usable and it was accessible because of the dry conditions. The forest was open to that, and it just added more money back into the agreement to get more work done. And that we were really pleased that they were willing to do that. And so that outside the box thinking and level of communication between the forest and us as a partner has been very good. The partnership has grown. We have developed modifications and looked at new operations to do, and even we're a partner on an IFWIF grant with Mississippi Forestry Association and the state agency to bring funding in to add to the CFLRP work that's being done under these activities. So just Antoine asked me to share a little bit about our experience. Again, it's short-lived. We signed an agreement 3 years ago, and due to some really wet weather, we've been paused for a good chunk of that. But our experience has been incredibly positive as a new partner to CFLRP in Mississippi.
That's very, thank you so much for that, Mr. Ross. So we're gonna move forward. We're gonna just briefly touch on how important it is for stewardships and partnership agreements. As Mr. Ross said, the recent one that we have with them is Biloxi Flats, and more recently, the Red Creek 2 stewardship. And these are just the outline of said stewardship projects that are so vital to us now. With Red Creek, for these two projects alone, we're looking at over 2,400 acres of clear cutting and replanting and 1,300 acres of longleaf pine restoration. So these two maps here are just showing their location, what they'll be working with us on. I spoke briefly about the Good Neighbor Authority as well as Mississippi Forestry Commission and Camp Shelby. This is one of our sales that we have up there. This is a stewardship that we have with Camp Shelby, and as you can see, it's about over 13,000 CCF with 775 operable acres. And this was a team effort. We had our Forest Service staff. We did the boundary layout work, and Mississippi Forestry Commission was in charge of going through the interior, abandoning trees and meeting minimum spacing of 30 by 30 for the military to operate their tanks and other practices in these areas. So this is one that is going to be coming on soon, but this is just a briefly touching on the Good Neighbor Authority that we have. So I talked about partnerships and as well as agreements, but where are we going with this? Well, one thing we like to use for CFLR is a lot of contract marketing. And this does provide a lot of jobs to local communities that want to bid on these and have subcontractors out. Two of our sales that were recently awarded is such an example. We use CFLR funding to pay for the contract work on both of these. It's over 40,000 CCF between these two sales, 2,700 acres of thinning and clear cutting and site prep and replanting at about 106 acres. And again, this is a roughly about 6 months worth of work. So if you take into consideration, we are helping to provide the local economy with a steady flow of work and learn about forestry here on the DeSoto Ranger District. As a district, we like to treat about 50 to 55,000 CCF a year So the next few slides I'm going to present to you our roadmap and how we plan on utilizing our CFLR funding. And it's basically contract marketing, but we typically like to do around 3 sales a year. This is 3 of them. We're looking to have an estimate of about over 25,000 CCF, and we're going to use CFLR funding to get the work done. 390 acres of longleaf restorations, where we're estimating about close to 10,000 acres of woodland restoration, about close to 500,000, 500 acres of pitcher plaque bog restoration. And any additional sales that we're going to be using to meet our target for that year will be used force accounting. We'll be used those to mark other sales in-house. 26, more along the line, the same thing, 3 sales, but we're trying to get about 60,000 CCF using CFLR dollars to fund the layout, the contract work and layout of all 3 sales again. And like I said, it's about 1,000 acres of longleaf pine restoration, and about 61 acres of woodland restoration. And lastly, 27, same deal. All sales will be using CFLR dollars, and we're looking to get about 41,000 CCF out of it, with about 614 acres of longleaf restoration and 200 of woodland restoration as well. But I talk a lot about timber. I mean, I'm the TMA in the timber shop, but what else do we use the CFLR dollars for? Well, we use to treat everyone's favorite invasive, Colgan grass. We've treated close to 20,000 acres of Colgan grass, and we also use CFLR dollars to fund roller chopping and as well as purchasing longleaf seedlings. So, but what are our challenges? Matt, Mr. Ross kind of touched on this a little bit when it comes to timber markets and inclement weather. So our timber markets, we've had a ton of sales recently go no bid, and we've had to repackage them. It's based on location of a lot of our mills. Pricing seems just right, it's just the location that kind of hampers us sometimes. Budgets, we've had some issues with that, getting funds allocated in time. Inclement weather, Matt touched on that again. Down here, like the last couple of years, we couldn't get it to stop raining, and it just rained and rained and rained, and especially on that south end, those soils down there is basically just a sponge. You can go a whole entire month without rain, but you stick down in there and they'll sink. So that's one of the big issues. But of course, this year we've been on a drought, almost 2 months of almost triple-digit temperatures. And with that, brought a lot of wildfires. So that kind of hampered us a little bit as well. But being that we took advantage of the drought that we've been having lately, and we've been cutting out a lot of our bogs that we've had on our sales. Some of our sales we've had in the past, and we made do with what we were given, despite the circumstances. And another one is heritage. I see a lot of there's talks about this, and a couple of presenters already kind of spoke on this as well. We've had a lot of heritage issues. We've had a backlog of things to get done, but we did still take advantage of the slowdown due to the COVID pandemic. We were able to catch up on a lot of that. But when it comes to heritage, we have things like road surveys and fire line surveys that can kind of hamper us for access to a lot of our sales. But we're making do, and we we are in a good place right now. But yes, heritage is definitely one. Lastly, our appreciation. We are truly grateful for CFLRs enabling us to accomplish as we strive on our purpose as a force and agency to care for the land and serving the people. With that, I turn it back over to the floor. Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you, Antoine and Matt. Really, really exciting to hear about your efforts in the Southeast. So we have about 10 minutes left, and we had originally hoped to do some small breakout sessions. I think given the time, we'll just keep that exercise for next time. The topic was going to be around what are some future topics you'd like to explore in this peer learning series. We do have that as a question in our follow-up survey for you all. So please, really appreciate your feedback. And if you do have ideas for future topics, go ahead and include those in your survey. And we'll circle back on that as well with this group at one of our upcoming peer learning sessions. Before we wrap up, I wanted to give one more opportunity for folks to submit some questions in the chat. I saw that there were a few questions along the way, some questions about beavers, some questions about other CFLR projects in Colorado. I think most of those have been answered in the chat, but if there's anything you'd like to expand on or any other questions, I'm just going to sit for a minute and see if any questions pop in. And if not, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Or we'll wrap up, I should say. Don't leave yet. Okay, so here's a question from Amy with the Walker Basin Conservancy, I think. I can't see the whole title there. Does an organization find or bring collaborators to the program, or does CFLRP assist with securing collaborators? I'll hand that one to Bryce and Lindsay.
Sure, I can answer that, and then Lindsay can chime in as you have additional things to add. CFLRP, the proposal process is, as Lindsay mentioned, it's competitive funding opportunities. So there is a proposal process, and the proposals need to be collaboratively developed. And then also the legislation specifies that the program should be collaboratively implemented. So we've had a wide variety of projects with collaboratives that are fully formed and have been working together for a long time. For example, the Rogue Basin Project and the Zuni Mountain Project talked about long histories of collaboration there. And then we have projects that have been less formal, have brought new collaborators together on the to develop a proposal, and then continue to increase partners as they go along and bring new collaborators in, perhaps like the Longleaf Project. So I would say it's a little bit of both, Amy, that there is an expectation that their collaborators are involved from the start, but oftentimes the proposal process for CFLRP is what brings the partners together. Anything to add, Lindsay?
I don't think so. I'd just be curious maybe to hear from some of our project presenters on your story. I do feel like, of course, each place and context varies, and often there's a history of successful collaboration, a foundation that's then sort of expanded upon and perhaps formalized through CFLRP. But curious if our project folks have any reflections they'd like to share.
Yeah, Lindsay, I'll take a stab, and I agree with Bryce that it can happen both ways, but collaboration, like Bryce said, really has to be happening before the proposal, and of course during the proposal period. Some of the newer projects are in really large landscapes, and that can often mean you have multiple collaborations happening, which adds a lot of complexity, but also can be a huge opportunity as well. So sometimes on those really large landscapes, you don't have one collaborative, you have many different ones, each with different either topical or geographic focus areas. And so that can be a real rich environment.
Great. Thanks, Bryce, Lindsay, and Eitan. Well, I do see
I would like to say something from the Rogue Basin Collaborative, and I know that the Section 106 and the NEPA has been a real challenge from the inception of the CFLRP, and I'd really like to suggest including tribes and really getting them on the ground for the Section 106 for long-term multi-party monitoring, and also at the beginning to set up these projects. So I think that as we move forward and that it becomes more normalized, that tribes are the first best stewards on the land and assisting in developing these large landscape initiatives on our ancestral land bases, that could definitely help us decrease that challenge and barrier. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Thanks, Belinda. So I see a couple more questions. I don't know if we'll totally have time for both. I think Belinda's comments addressed a little bit Anne's question about capacity and funding for heritage concerns, with an encouragement to include tribes early in that. Another question in the chat is in regard to the Zuni Mountain Project, have you had the opportunity to work with any of the ancestral lands programs in the area? So maybe we'll wrap up on that question.
Yeah, real quick. Yes, we're connecting with Zuni Pueblo from the beginning, and of course Acoma and Zuni Pueblos and Navajo Nation chapters, and even the Navajo Nation proper. I think there's a lot more work to do there, and there's different connections sometimes around specific actions happening in the landscape, but I think it's happening, but a lot of opportunities to explore. And I was really enthusiastic to see the presentation from Belinda and Marco.
Great. Well, thanks so much to all of our presenters. I'm going to hand it over in a minute to Bryce Esch to just provide a closing comment or two. Want to remind you that you will receive a follow-up email. Please do fill out that survey for us. And visit the NFF's website to learn about future peer learning session opportunities. And we'll put that link in the chat. Bryce, over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. And I just want to thank the National Forest Foundation for their support and coordination and facilitation of this meeting, and all of our presenters, Forest Service and partners, and recognize that the partners and the Forest Service employees on the ground are really essential for the success of this program, and just want to recognize all your work and give you all a big virtual round of applause. And I also want to mention, I'm really looking forward to seeing you all in future peer learning sessions. So looking forward to your survey responses and hearing more about what you'd like to discuss in future sessions. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everyone. We hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.